There is without a doubt many a ways for a human to become a werewolf. But in almost all the folk tales, there is one thing that is for certain. A werewolf cannot resist the urge to come to the surface underneath the pale light of a full moon. Thanks for listening to this week's horror podcast. Damn it. Hey, I'm Hound. And it's finally October, so you know what that means. Time for all the normies to act like they give a shit about horror. Yay. But in all seriousness, everyone starts watching more horror films around the fall time / Halloween, just because of the vibes that it gives off. And I am no exception to that. I watch Trick or Treat every year, and I watch all of the Friday the 13th films every single year leading up to Halloween. And also I watch an exponentially higher rate of horror films during the month of October, again due to the vibes. So being the resident werewolf expert that I am, I tend to get asked this question a lot around Halloween about what werewolf films I recommend to people, and it's never as simple as, hey, just watch these, because it can never be that simple. So I wanted to make a quick video compiling all of my favorite werewolf films and their reasons in order to recommend them to people. And so I'm going to be organizing the list in top 8 werewolf films, period. Honorable mentions will then be subcategorized into werewolf films that are focused on werewolves, werewolf films that do not focus on werewolves, and then kids films. And then if you're a big nerd like me and you want to study the history of werewolves in cinema, I will be giving a quick list of the films that I recommend for that. Quick disclaimer though, in films that I feel like the costume / the transformation of the werewolf is integral to the viewing experience, I will not be including clips of either the costume or the transformation in order to preserve that for you when you go to watch the film yourself. But without further ado, break out your flannel, put on your stretchy pants, and get started. Number 8 is WolfCop.
No, Lou, pump your fucking brake.
Robbery.
Lou, you're a wolf.
Cop.
In WolfCop, we follow Lou Garou. Yes, his name is Lou Garou. As we have an Edgar Wright-inspired montage of just how terrible of a fucking cop he is. He wakes up late next to a naked lady. First thing he does is drink some more alcohol, and then on the way to the cruiser, he fucking barfs. While at the station, they get a call from local conspiracy theorist, Willie Higgins.
What is it this time?
Don't you come around back.
Who is talking about some occult activity that's going on in the woods. And Lou Garou is sent to check that out. And he basically just goes, oh, it's heavy metal bands.
So I'm gonna give you an AK-47, I'm gonna take an M16, we're gonna find those kids.
You ever hear of heavy metal?
Like lead, fucking mercury.
And after doing such hard work, he rewards himself by going and getting plastered at the bar.
That's what we need. Bunch of drunks with guns running around. Very funny.
That night, he's called back out into the woods for some more occult activity, and he's fucking kidnapped and turned into a werewolf. Meow. Meow. Yes.
Holy hell. Behind you.
And so that's how this movie begins. What ensues is wolf out of water kind of comedy hijinks where a werewolf is a cop.
Hey Lou, don't forget to murder someone else on the way to the car.
All right, so my thoughts on WolfCop. WolfCop is such a wacky and insane concept that plays out almost completely normally somehow, which only makes it more enjoyable. I cannot stress just how wacky this plot can get at times.
I know what you're thinking, and I approve.
Hello.
Carl?
I love seeing Jesse Moss from Ginger Snaps, and Jonathan Cherry plays Willie Higgins, who is the conspiracy theorist. Jonathan Cherry is from House of the Dead and also Final Destination, which Jesse Moss is also a part of. But he is absolutely one of the highlights of this film for me.
Think you shrunk it.
What? What was that? Thank you, Willie, for helping me. You're welcome.
He is just so fun to watch on screen. The editing is heavily inspired by Edgar Wright at times, so take a shot every time there's a quick cut montage sequence with punch-ins and zooms and transitions. It's about 5 or 6 times, so it's kind of mild. Should be easy. The costume in WolfCop.
Robert.
All right, the costume isn't the greatest. I will say real quick that WolfCop was made for around a $1 million budget, so they didn't have balls to the wall type money for their stuff. But the fact that the costume is mostly just prosthetics on the actor's face adds its own flair, to be honest. The transition, on the other hand, is one of those let's make it as gory as possible kind of transformations, and that's always fun by my book.
It kind of looks like you.
Oh, sorry I'm late, Chief. I had to stop off at the brewery.
Why you should watch WolfCop. Honestly, this one is so low on the list because it is primarily a werewolf film for werewolf lovers, and so I have a hard time recommending it to people that don't like werewolves already. It plays like an homage to B films, like B horror films with just the wackiest and most outrageous plots that you could ever conceive that barely make any cohesive sense.
Hey! You got any books on devil worship?
But all in all, it's a fun trip and it doesn't take itself too seriously. I mean, for fuck's sake, there's a werewolf sex scene. And the werewolf can talk and he makes one-liners.
What the fuck are you?
The flies.
What's not to love about this film? So number 7 is Late Phases. Have you ever wanted to see a blind war vet take on a werewolf? No? You're missing out. Nick D'Amici plays the aforementioned war vet Ambrose, who just so happens to be blind. When he is reluctantly pushed into a senior citizens kind of retirement community by his son, played by Ethan Embry, who is trying to move forward in his life and can't handle taking care of his father after the recent passing of his mother, especially when his father doesn't want to be taken care of.
Oh, there don't tend to be firearms at Crescent Bay.
Oh, that's nice.
But on the night of his arrival to the retirement community, the werewolf strikes.
I'd feel so much better if you let us get you a dog. Just a little someone to keep you company.
What follows is a whodunit centered around a man with nothing to lose, hell-bent on revenge, sniffing out the retirement community's members for one with an evil secret.
Stop, Ambrose! Oh my God! He's in an iron lung.
You fucking bastard.
All right, my thoughts on Late Phases. Featuring a stellar performance by Nick D'Amici as our stubborn, but ultimately very likable protagonist.
How'd you know I was the mailman?
I'm not deaf. You want some chicken?
His son, played by the always fun to see Ethan Embry, who I always remember from Can't Hardly Wait.
Thanks, man. That was the funniest thing I've seen all night.
A supporting role from none other than Monster Squad's Frankenstein.
Hey guys, get over here! He's great!
And of course, we open up with a cameo from the king of cameos, the man who loves Wendigos as much as I love werewolves, Larry Fessenden.
No senior citizen discount.
I sell headstones at a senior citizen discount. I won't last long.
There are obviously a shit ton of Silver Bullet parallels in this film. We've got a disabled main character who has to take on the big bad in order to save the town, but also personally becomes a target due to their inquisitive nature and determination to discover who the beast is. Even a scene where he goes into town to get a silver bullet fashioned for him, topped off with references to the Lone Ranger.
What do silver bullets make you think of? Me? Lone Ranger.
Being the final nail in the coffin, letting you know that the creators were heavily inspired by Silver Bullet. The costumes in late phases. The werewolf in this is not the best. It's kind of how it's going to go for a little bit. It is bipedal, so it has that going for it, but the facial structure of the costume is just off. It's less of a snout and more like a pug. And the very little puppeteering / mechanical work that goes on just gives Party City costume vibes. It does, however, include a transformation sequence that kind of feels like it's just ripped off of American Werewolf in London, but nonetheless, it looks good, and again is one of those ones that's like, let's just throw all the gore at the wall and make it gory and painful and really just sit there and watch it, you know? So it's fine, it's serviceable. Why you would watch late phases? The reason you should watch late phases is not for the werewolf costume or the transformation, but instead for Nick D'Amici's incredible performance.
What the fuck?
The plot structure of a blind war vet versus a werewolf, as well as the added benefit of a well-executed father-son relationship dynamic, as well as a man's love for his seeing eye dog. Number 6, Bad Moon. So we go from blind war vet versus werewolf to German shepherd versus werewolf. In Bad Moon, we follow a mom, her 90s kid, and their overprotective German shepherd called Thor. Everything seems perfect for the successful single mom until she hears from her brother Ted, who recently came back from his trip overseas, where he reveals to his sister that his girlfriend was fucking murdered, and that since then he's been super depressed.
No, it's just me and my shadow.
Okay, so quick note, it's been a while since I watched the film. I don't know if he actually says that she's murdered or if he says that they broke up. I think he says that they broke up. I'm not sure. I wrote down murdered because that's a funny fucking joke. But anyways.
Things haven't been going so good for me since I got back from the jungle, sis. Marjorie's gone.
It's no secret in the film that Ted is the werewolf, so no whodunit here. The tension comes from how close Ted gets to the family, moving onto their land and injecting himself into their lives, seemingly planning an invasive takeover, thinking that the love of his sister and her kid will somehow cure his werewolf disease. But there's one thing in his way. Wary from the start, the loyal German shepherd Thor watches Ted's every step with a keen eye, letting him know that he isn't fooling the real big dog of the house, and that he won't win without a fight. Thoughts on Bad Moon? This is 100% the typical fare for a low-budget 90s kind of B film, werewolf film with nothing really standing out about it. There are some genuinely funny moments in it, absolutely. But it's easy to see the draw of this film isn't the characters, it's not the acting, it's not the story. So then why is this film on my list? Well, the costume in this film, it's something else. What is this movie from 1996 doing with the best fucking werewolf costume you have ever seen? What the fuck? Now, there will be no spoilers for this one, but if you've seen Jingle All the Way, and after you watch this film, let me know if you see any kind of resemblance between the werewolf of Bad Moon and Booster from Jingle All the Way. I just want to know if I'm the only one.
Nobody likes you, Booster.
But anyways, regardless, this is legitimately the best werewolf costume there is. I've ran the numbers, watched all the movies, rewatched all the movies, compared them, I've looked at behind the scenes, everything. This is legitimately the best werewolf costume there is. And we haven't topped it since. And it's in this film. And it's also accompanied by the worst transformation sequence ever. Oh man. A victim of 90s CGI technology being the hip new thing. And the unspoken rule of werewolf films being, oh, you gotta have a transformation sequence. The transformation scene offers some serious fucking whiplash, where you're watching and the acting is so laughable, and then he starts to transform, and it's just straight up hilarious. And then it goes from the absolute dog shit, terrible CGI that should not have ever been in the final cut of the film. And it morphs from just laugh your ass off CGI transformation, and it morphs into the actual fucking costume. And you're back to being fucking scared. Literal fucking whiplash. I love the transformation scene for that alone. Just going from such a laughable transformation to the best and most terrifying werewolf costume is almost like a power move. Like a, yeah, the transformation's ass. The fuck you gonna do about it? It's obvious to see why you should watch this film. The costume's amazing. Watch it. Like, if you're big on special effects like I am, and you love costumes, and you love rigging, and you love the mechanical side of it, watch this film. And also the plot of the dog versus werewolf thing, which actually happens. So that's cool too. All right. Oh, number 8, 7, 6, 5? I'm gonna just guess. Number 5, Silver Bullet. From blind war vet versus werewolf to German Shepherd versus werewolf to kid in a gas-powered wheelchair versus werewolf. I'm noticing a pattern. In Silver Bullet, our protagonist is Marty, an all-around normal kid besides the fact that he is bound to a wheelchair that just so happens to be a badass gas-powered wheelchair that his Uncle Red built for him. We open in the 1970s in the heart of small-town USA where all is fine on the surface, before we see through spying eyes that a woman is expecting a child with an adulterer who wants nothing to do with her. Later, that same woman is alone in her room, attempting suicide, apparently, when the werewolf beats her to the punch. After a few more kills and a chance encounter on Lover's Bridge, Marty feels fueled to discover who the werewolf really is, roping in his sister and later his Uncle Red. Thoughts? One of the best things in this movie is the family dynamic, and how everyone has a different outlook on life when it comes to Marty. His sister Jane thinks that Marty should be treated like every other kid and not protected from the consequences of his actions. The mother, on the other hand, coddles him in a way, not wanting him to be discouraged by anything, scared that he might give up if too much in his life goes wrong. Marty's best friend is admirable and doesn't even recognize Marty's disabilities. Marty's uncle shares a Jane-adjacent view that Marty shouldn't be treated with padding and should be able to enjoy the nice things in life that every other kid is able to enjoy. That he should be made to feel like a normal kid. As a disabled person myself, this is incredibly interesting to me, and on my recent rewatch, after dozens of rewatches paying attention to the kills and waiting for the werewolf, the family dynamic is what was drawing in my attention this time.
I am scared to death that someday he is just gonna give up.
He's not gonna give up!
Well, he doesn't need you showing him how to do it!
Another thing that stuck out to me was just how memorable almost all of the characters in this film are. From the sheriff, who is none other than the stepfather Terry O'Quinn, to Andy Ferton, the renegade townsman with constant clapbacks.
This whole investigation has been about as efficient as a submarine with screen doors.
Marty's best and possibly only friend, Brady, the gas station owner that's only in one scene, I think, but is one of the main things I think about when I think of this film, due to the...
Fill her up, please.
Want me to check the oil?
Yeah, sure.
Wipe the windshield and check the driver's bullshit level?
That's what I think about when I think of this film. There's just something about how well these characters are incorporated into the story, each of them building up the world and adding to the small town feel of it so perfectly. I don't know if I'm the only person that feels this way, but it's one of my favorite things about the film. There are some good kills here, specifically one where a guy falls on a 2x4, dying before the werewolf can actually get to him, and then another one where a guy is beaten to death by a werewolf with a baseball bat. A werewolf with a fucking bat. Silver Bullet's costume. Okay, so costume isn't that great here. Honestly, it kind of looks more like a badger than anything else. You know, there's a scene halfway through the film that is essentially a fever dream where an entire room of people turn into werewolves. Even the piano player, who keeps playing the piano. And it's just fun. Why should you watch Silver Bullet? You cannot beat 1980s Stephen King, let alone the way King handles family dynamics, as well as this being the only King werewolf film. Also, I really like the score, and it will stay with you for a while after you watch it. On top of all that, there are definitely some memorable kills, as I mentioned before. Great performances out of specifically Gary Busey and Corey Haim, and a very believable little town with a lot of memorable characters inhabiting it. Number 4, Ginger Snaps.
Oh, gross. Shit, you got some on you.
Nice.
What?
Just got the curse.
Ew.
Well, it's not contagious.
Let's get out of here.
So, the plot of Ginger Snaps. Ginger and her younger sister Bridget are death-obsessed, not like the other girls, in late 90s high school in white suburban Canada land, when on the night that they decide to prank the school's popular girl by making her think that her dog is dead, they get attacked by a fucking werewolf. And Ginger ends up being bitten, and so she starts to change. But everyone seems to think it's just period, you know, she's finally starting menstruation. But no, she's turning into a fucking werewolf. She's growing a fucking tail and shit. This creates a divide between the once close-knit sisters as they try to cure her recent ailment. Thoughts on Ginger Snaps? Taking the werewolf mythos and reworking it into a metaphor for puberty in a quasi-coming-of-age tale is what has set this film above the rest. This is a story about two sisters, led amazingly by Emily Perkins and Catherine Isabel, that start out connected at the hip and slowly grow apart. It's a story that a lot of people can relate to, and it's no surprise that it resonates so strongly with trans people as well. This one became an instant classic and rightfully deserves its spot, forever etched as one of the best werewolf films out there. Because it takes the werewolf and turns it into something so much more than just a beast, with characters that we can care about. The costume. Okay, so the werewolf in Ginger Snaps is a quadruped. Yeah, it's a quadruped, whatever. But at least the mechanical work on the puppet is pretty damn good for a low-budget Canadian film. However, this film boasts something that not many other werewolf films do. The transformation takes place over multiple days and weeks leading up to the next full moon, meaning that this is a permanent transformation, making this not only unique for the topics that it discusses and the way that it discusses them, but also unique in the realm of even werewolf films, for being one of the only films to include permanent transformation. Amazing. Why you should watch Ginger Snaps. So first off, this is also one of the films that gives off heavy fall vibes. It's set during August-ish, I believe. Also, wait, no, yeah, it's set around Halloween. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Sweet. But also the chemistry between Emily and Catherine, as well as the writing of the characters, meshes so well on screen. Also, seeing a high school setting with werewolves, kind of awesome. It's a story about growing up and growing apart with the backdrop of werewolf body horror and anxiety. Also, The fake movie on TV has an insanely good werewolf costume, and if you know where I can buy that, please let me know, thanks. Number 3, The Howling.
Hello, Eddie.
I knew you'd come, Karen.
Can I turn around and see you?
Not yet, Karen. I'm gonna light up your whole body, Karen.
Turn around now, Karen.
Karen White is a news anchor in busy LA who is being targeted by a serial killer, and her news station wants to use her as bait, and the cops are okay with this? Okay, so she goes to meet her pen pal at an adult video store stall. Things go about as well as you would expect them to.
I knew I shouldn't have left that broad back here.
And she nearly gets killed in the process and is traumatized. So much so to the fact that she has, like, compartmentalized amnesia about the event and can't remember anything that happens.
Whatever happened, in your own words, nothing newsy.
I don't know what happened in there.
So she sees a therapist, and her therapist recommends going to a hippie commune. Weed, tits, and Uncle Jim Bob on the banjo. What's not to love? Werewolves. So, thoughts on Howling. After just rewatching this film to gather my thoughts on it, there's a ton of issues, from directing to editing to even the motivation of certain characters' actions.
Stop!
That's nasty.
But all of that still doesn't detract from the feel of the movie. We've got every kid's mom in the 80s, Dee Wallace, directed by Joe Dante, who did tons of things from Terminator to Gremlins. Because it's a Joe Dante flick, that means, yep, we got a Dick Miller cameo.
A classic werewolf can change shape anytime it wants, day or night, whenever it takes a notion to.
What about killing it with silver bullets?
Silver bullets are fire. It's the only way to get rid of the damn things. They're worse than cockroaches.
Not to mention, Robert Picardo plays a fucking werewolf.
Well, here I am, Karen. Look at me. I want to give you a piece of my mind.
Also, there's a werewolf sex scene. Costume. Okay, so in The Howling, the special effects were at the very least supervised by Rick Baker before he left to go work on American Werewolf in London. And after Rick left to go work on that other film, he left a little person in charge named Rob Bottin. Yeah, so you know what that means. Fucking sick werewolf costumes. They're very large, very tall, and they have very long snouts. They also have very sharp ears that look like a mix between rabbit ears and wolf ears. With a transformation scene that, lady, you could have just left. But anyways, with a transformation scene that is overindulgent in the right ways, and is done all practically, it's pretty cool. Why you would watch. The Howling franchise is the longest running werewolf series there is. That is, if you don't count the Count Valdemar Daninsky appearances by Paul Naschy, which are in multiple different films and not a cohesive franchise. So it's nice to see where it all started and simultaneously act like it's the only one in existence. But jokes aside, this film does actually stand up to the test of time thanks to amazing, amazing practical effects, some stop motion work in there too, as well as a hell of an eye behind the camera. This is the second most important werewolf film of the 80s. Which leads us to number 2, American Werewolf in London.
Hello? I can assure you that this is not in the least bit amusing. Good Lord.
Two Americans are backpacking their way across the moors when they stop at an ominous pub dubbed the Slaughtering Lamb, where Jack is quick to anger the locals.
Excuse me. What's that scar on the wall for?
Who warn them to stick to the roads.
You just can't let them go?
Go. Stay on the road.
That goes about as well as you expect it to, and Jack gets fucking murdered.
You really scared me, you shithead. You gonna help me up or what?
But thankfully, the locals did not trust the kids to stay on the roads, so they followed them out there and are able to kill the large bear. And then bam, David wakes up in a hospital. A sexy hospital.
A wolf. Did he say a wolf?
Wherein he puts the moves on his nurse and ends up moving in with her.
Do you have somewhere to stay in London?
They move quick in London, all the while getting visited by his dead friend.
Can I have a piece of toast?
Who keeps warning him of the curse of the werewolf, that he'll transform under the full moon and kill.
David! What?
David shrugs off his dead friend's ominous words.
I will not be threatened by a walking meatloaf.
Yeah, so thoughts. Okay, one of the most well-rounded films in the genre, doing a fantastic job of handling and balancing comedy and seriousness while still having a great emotional impact, seamlessly transitioning from jokes and laughter to serious horror at a moment's notice. This movie is just one of those really fucking fun films to watch.
Say knock knock. Knock knock. Who's there? Who? Don't you get it?
The score is entirely comprised of songs that have moon in the title or reference wolves or werewolves. And so you can tell that it's not taking itself super seriously. As well as the characters are all very fun. I specifically very much enjoy seeing Jack's character every time I watch this movie.
David!
As well as the budding romance between David and his nurse, who I may or may not have a crush on. So the costume in American Werewolf in London, it's a quadruped. Boo! Quadruped or not, this has become the most iconic interpretation of werewolves there is. With Rick Baker at the helm and a pretty damn nifty mechanical contraption, this costume / puppet helped land this film at the top of many people's werewolf lists. Not only does this film contain one of the best mechanical puppets for werewolves, but it also quite possibly contains the best werewolf transformation sequence ever put on screen. Again, huge ups to Rick Baker for the amazing effects, and also huge ups to John Landis for really indulging in the bone-breakingly agonizing sequence. Why you should watch American Werewolf in London? Honestly, there's so many fucking reasons. The soundtrack being all moon-related song, Jenny a Gutter,
I'm not in the habit of bringing home stray young American men.
Jack,
David!
the comedy,
Just tell him I'm dead.
the great effects,
I realize I don't look so hot, David.
the tortured soul.
I think that a werewolf can only be killed by someone who loves him. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Wacky nightmare scenes.
All right already.
This film is the granddaddy of modern werewolf films. So if American Werewolf in London is the granddaddy of the modern werewolf, and I talk so highly of it, you know, how come it's not at the top of the list? Because if you didn't notice, it's number 2, right? So what could be better? What could be better than American Werewolf in London? Well, number 1, Dog Soldiers. So the plot of Dog Soldiers is Soap McTavish and his band of brothers are dropped in the Scottish wilderness for a training mission. We get some bicker and character development as they wander deeper into the woods. And telling ghost stories by the campfire. Soon they stumble upon the torn-through remnants of the training exercise opposition. Sole survivor Captain Ryan, barely alive, muttering words of vague ominousness. They attempt to call it in and get an emergency evacuation, but their comms aren't working.
Of course I checked it and I double-checked it and it worked fine!
Their situation goes from worse to worser when they start being hunted by something. Something in the woods, with black and white vision. Bruce Campbell's MP5 jams and he gets killed by an evil tree branch. Bruce Campbell. Evil tree branch. Huh. Anyways, meanwhile, Sergeant H.G. Wells is half bisected and demands that his squad leaves him for dead and saves themselves. Turns out he trained them too well and they won't let that happen.
Back off! You can take your orders and shove them up your ass!
They march on, emptying clips to buy time when they run into a convenient woman in a Jeep. Or should I say, she runs into them. She escorts the squad to the nearest house where they where they recoup and strategize their defense in order to survive the night. Thoughts? No amount of words can describe just how badass, fun, and amazing this film is. Just trust me, there is a reason this is at the top of my fucking list. The dynamic between the characters is so well fleshed out and believable and fun.
I love you, fucking pussy!
The concept of a group of trained military fending off a group of werewolves is a fucking goldmine, and this movie delivers. But let's take a quick pit stop at this costume. I'm just gonna pull up the clip. God, they look so good. These are some of the fucking best costumes. Okay, so I know I mentioned that the Bad Moon is the best. It still is. But god fucking damn. So fucking good. So, sporting wolf heads on top of ballet dancers on stilts, adding beauty and stature to their movements in ways we haven't seen before or since, making these werewolves some of the most graceful you will ever fucking see. There is a small little bump though. The transformation scene, which I will stand by that no werewolf film has to absolutely have a transformation scene. I will die on that fucking hill. The transformation scene is very early werewolf. Basically, they just go out of frame and then pop back up as a werewolf. You know, low budget, they did what they had to, much better than CGI. But it's all forgivable because goddamn, these fucking costumes, as well as the actors in them, steal the fucking show. And the graceful, domineering werewolves will leave a mark you won't soon forget. So why you should watch Dog Soldiers? Well, if the fact that it's at the top of my list isn't making you want to go see it right now, well, this isn't a werewolf film with soldiers. This is primarily a soldier film that just happens to have werewolves. I find that the best werewolf films are ones that don't over-abuse the fact that they're werewolf films, like Ginger Snaps. It's great because it takes the premise and crafts itself around the werewolf. Similarly, Dog Soldiers is a castle defense squadron film with amazingly lovable characters, great fucking humor, and it just so happens to be that they're defending that castle from some of the most terrifying fucking werewolves you'll ever see. So yeah, that will probably forever be at the top of my list. That's my top 8 list. Now we're moving on to honorable mentions. So now that I'm done with the top 8 list, it is time to move on to honorable mentions. I will be doing honorable mentions of werewolves that have a small part in the film. First up on this list is Trick or Treat.
This is the one night
Don't forget your costume.
All sorts of things. Roam free.
Every single fucking year you should watch this for Halloween, no matter what. Okay? It's kind of a law now. But if you haven't seen it, there are actually werewolves in the film. I'm not going to spoil it, very important. But Trick or Treat is a great anthology horror film. It's very tightly woven together with a very fun, overarching story between all the parts. And it's centered on Halloween, obviously. When this film came out, it became an instant cult classic for a reason. Everybody should go watch this film. It's amazing. What We Do in the Shadows.
The neighbors can see you flying around. You want to draw attention to this house,
Got a whole documentary crew following you around.
This is one of Taika Waititi's early films, and it's in a found footage style centering around a group of flatmates that just so happen to be vampires. And in the film, there are werewolves, played by, what's his fucking name? Rhys Darby. I fucking love Rhys Darby. But anyways, Rhys Darby plays the werewolf pack leader, and it leads to some funny stuff, you know? Like, we're werewolves, not swearwolves.
What are we?
Werewolves, not werewolves.
What We Do in the Shadows is a great comedy film. I love almost all of Taika Waititi's films, so of course I heavily recommend this film to everybody. Next up is Van Helsing.
My job is to vanquish evil. Van Helsing.
This entire movie, it very much feels more like a send-up of Hammer horror. This film also has something that a lot of other films can't say. It has one of the better werewolves that are CG. Really. But also this film has Richard Roxburgh hamming it the fuck up. Not to mention Huge Jacked Man and Kate Beckinsale. This movie's wacky, okay? I like it. All right, this is kind of like a half recommend. I just feel like talking about it here. But Brotherhood of the Wolf.
It was at the dawn of the Age of Reason that first appeared the beast. Upon the county of Gévaudan, it would strike without warning. Brotherhood of the Wolf.
This isn't really a werewolf. It's a spoiler. It's not a werewolf, but it helps with expectations when you walk into a film. Like the first time I watched it, I was expecting a werewolf and I was upset. And so I would want somebody walking into that film not expecting a werewolf. You know what I mean? So why I'm talking about this film is because it's about the Beast of Gévaudan, which is one of the first historical accounts of werewolves. And at the end of the day, this was not that bad of a film. Again, it's kind of a half recommend, not really a werewolf. I'm just talking about it because it's about the Beast of Gévaudan. So, next up is Fright Night.
I have a vampire living next door to me, and he's gonna kill me.
A vampire cannot enter your house without being invited first.
This is our next door neighbor, Jerry Dandridge.
Hello, Charlie.
Fright Night.
In the original Fright Night, Evil Ed is actually turned into a werewolf after being bitten by the cop from Child's Play, making this technically a werewolf film. And anytime you can recommend Fright Night to more people, you should. Monster Squad.
Creatures of the night shall rule the world, and there is no one can
With Monster Squad.
Basically all of the Universal horror monsters just like invade a town, and the only thing that can stop them is a group of kids. Ridiculous premise? Yes. It's great. Watch it. Wolf of Snow Hollow.
Or maybe it's a werewolf.
There is no such thing as werewolves.
This is a recent werewolf film that has me on the fence about calling it a werewolf film for reasons that you'll understand if you watch the film. But it's made by Jim Cummings after he did Thunder Road, and it has some good kills, and it has this really great atmosphere about it. It feels otherworldly. It's great. One of the recent werewolf films that I saw that was good. All right, now it's time to move on to honorable mentions where the werewolves are the main focus of the film. So first up is Cursed.
I waited over an hour.
I'm sorry.
For over an hour, I waited.
You okay? Do you hear that?
This is Wes Craven's werewolf film with practical effects from the great Rick Baker, but as most people know, the werewolf in this is mostly CGI, which sucks, but the little bit of practical effects that you do get in this film are fucking fantastic. There are some really great high-tension moments in this film, combined with a werewolf giving the middle finger. And even a dog werewolf.
What kind of dog do you have? I have a regular dog.
So, yeah. Underworld.
Who are you people?
You're in the middle of a war that's been raging for the better part of 1,000 years. A blood feud between vampires and lichens. Werewolves.
Underworld.
Of course I'm going to talk about Underworld. The original Vampires vs. Werewolves movie still holds up to this day, and also as a fun look back at what early 2000s post-Matrix action films were like. I recommend watching the first one, and then 2 and 3 if you enjoyed the first one. It's very interesting. I actually really enjoy the werewolves in this series as well. Underworld 2 actually has what was the contender for the best werewolf costume ever. I call him Snowball. But yeah, next up is the Wolfman.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
Okay, you can't talk about werewolf films without mentioning the great-great-great-grandpa of werewolves. The awesome special effects by Jack Pierce that would go on to inspire a whole generation of artists in the industry, and a performance by Lon Chaney Jr. that would nearly cement the story of the werewolf as one of a tortured soul racked with guilt. There is a lot to get from this film, but personally, if you're looking to watch a good Universal horror film, Dracula's better. I'll admit defeat. Next up, American Werewolf in Paris.
She's obviously whack. Kind of girl jumps off the Eiffel Tower, has issues, man. Major issues. I was attacked by this big, wild dog.
An American Werewolf in Paris.
Ow. Ow, ow, ow.
Roast me if you will. This one's probably just me. I actually grew up watching this film, and I saw this before I even heard of American Werewolf in London. So yeah, the werewolves look terrible. They're CG. They're nowhere near the level of the CG in Van Helsing or Cursed. That goes without saying. It's kind of a B movie. The acting isn't all that great, but it does have Julia Delpy in it. That's nice. If you like cheesy 90s shit, this is probably for you. It's a really enjoyable film for me. Last one is Company of Wolves.
Here, dreams become reality, and our darkest fantasies come true.
The worst kind of wolves are hairy on the inside.
To a fantastic realm.
What have you done with my granddaughter?
Nothing. The Company of Wolves.
This is an anthology film centered on word-of-mouth stories, combining tons of different mythologies and tales told by the characters with some pretty insane effects for the time that you really wouldn't expect. But either way, this movie just feels entirely like a fairy tale. This movie is just like drenched in fairy tale aesthetic. And so I actually ended up looking it up, and it's the same production designers as the people who did The Dark Crystal and other Muppet films. So that was super neat. The set design in this film is by far the standout for me, as well as the transformation scene in the first tale, because you do not expect, like, you look at the film and you're like, okay, modest budget, and then it busts that shit out, and like, oh my god, dude. But yeah.
A wolf bit me. Not all who are bitten change. There must be something wild within.
I was sleeping all day. How do you feel?
Good. We got 5 new murders. What is there about a full moon?
It feels good to be wolf.
Hey, Editing Hound here. This was cut for not being too standouty, but in retrospect, this film does things that you don't often see. A werewolf story set in New York with a meager publishing agent getting walked all over, eventually turning into a werewolf and using the newfound confidence to take back control of his life. There are lots of issues with this film, which is why I originally excluded it, but it is kind of funny at times, and it's great to essentially see Jack Nicholson with just a little bit of extra facial hair going around attacking people. The effects are by Rick Baker, score by Ennio Morricone, Jack Nicholson as a werewolf, James Spader as a werewolf, Michelle Pfeiffer, nothing more to say there, and Jack Nicholson pees on James Spader. There may be lots of issues with the film, but there's also quite a good bit to enjoy. Going to go ahead and talk about the kids' movies real quick while I'm here. First up is WolfWalkers.
The forest is brimming with wolves. It's my job to hunt them down, not yours.
He's one of them WolfWalkers.
You're a wolf when you sleep. Something's happened to me. Yeah, I can see that. It's flippin' great.
This is a recent kids film from animation studio Cartoon Saloon that focuses on a group of wolves that are led by a mom and her daughter who are wolfwalkers, people that turn into wolves in their sleep. But the pack is in danger because the townspeople want the wolves out of their woods. When the daughter of a professional wolf killer gets accidentally bit, she turns into a wolfwalker. Hilarity ensues. So the draw-in for this film is great, unique animation, as well as it's accompanied by some great music. And overall, it's an enjoyable ride of a film. Alvin and the Chipmunks meet the Wolfman. Come on. This is the children's werewolf film. When I was growing up, this was always on TV every single Halloween, technically every single October. You'd find it on the cartoon channels. It's amazing. But it's so cute, and it has fall vibes out the fucking wazoo. The Chipmunks get a new neighbor, and much like in Fright Night, he's not what he seems. And so it's up to them to prove that, you know, he's a creature of the night. It's a cute film. Like, if any film you're going to show to your kids about werewolves, I think this should be it. The next up is kind of like an honorable mention, because it's Wallace and Gromit and The Curse of the Were-Rabbit.
The gardens of England are in danger.
I have the most terrible rabbit problem.
From a terror so fierce.
Oh, they must be breeding like, well, rabbits.
Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit.
Okay, so it's not a werewolf, but you can't not mention this when you're talking about werewolf films. But yeah, this is Wallace and Gromit. You can expect great stop motion work, good humor, and then it's just mwah, you know? All right, so I'm also going to talk really quickly about B-movies that I recommend, because there are a few. Okay, so first up is Game of Werewolves. This is basically just one of the funniest fucking werewolf films that I've ever seen. And so I can't not recommend it, you know? If you can find it, do watch it. It's funny as hell and enjoyable, and the costumes aren't that bad either. The next one is Blood Moon.
They're real, and they're out there.
Oh, Jesus H. Christ!
It's not that great of a film, but I only mention it because it's so ballsy. It's basically a werewolf western, which is such a unique premise. I can't not mention it, you know? So next up is Teddy.
C'est loup, la tête de ma mère, j'arrive.
Le maudit voit son corps changer à mesure que les pulsions de chasse l'envahissent.
So I recently watched a bunch of new werewolf films, and the only one that really stood out for me was this one. And it's not so much for the werewolf action, so if you want to watch it, don't expect like a lot of werewolf stuff to happen. But I specifically really liked the characters, and I really enjoyed the one scene where there's a werewolf, because there is one scene. That was really fucking good. I don't know if anybody's even going to watch it. I need somebody to talk about that movie with, honestly. The last one that I recommend that is technically a B film or a low budget film is Howling 5. Okay, so earlier I talked about how it's nice to imagine that the Howling is the only one to ever exist. I kind of like Howling 5. Basically, Howling 5 is a werewolf whodunit set inside a medieval castle. Wacky premise. Yeah, what are you gonna do? Similarly, you can watch what is essentially the original version of this, called The Beast Must Die.
One of these 8 people is a werewolf. Can you guess which one? When the moon is full, the beast must die.
Just don't expect what we know as a werewolf in that film, because it's basically just a dog. But yeah, that similarly is a werewolf sort of whodunit set at a castle that towards the end is infamous for doing what is called the werewolf break, where right before the climax of the movie, it pauses and it's like, who of these characters is the werewolf? And you have to guess. And it's like, yay, audience participation. It's fun. All right, I'm going to try to zoom through this real quick. These are the werewolf classics that I recommend for studying if you're interested in the history of werewolves on film. Got to run through these. Werewolf of London, made in 1935.
When my experiments are completed, I will show their results to the entire world.
Remember this, Dr. Glendon. The werewolf instinctively seeks to kill the thing it loves best.
This is the earliest surviving werewolf film, beating out the Wolfman by a good 6 years, involving a unique angle of a moon-blooming plant as a temporary cure for the werewolf curse, and a final scene that will be all too familiar if you've seen American Werewolf in London. This movie surprised me, and I do in fact consider it to be better than The Wolfman in some parts. The Wolfman, 1941. We're mentioning it again because this is for different reasons. This is it. This is what people consider to be the werewolf film that kicked this whole genre off and is the baseline for everything that came after it. Jack Pierce does the makeup here, and actually Jack Pierce did the makeup for Werewolf of London as well, but the design that he originally intended for Werewolf of London was passed over because it covered too much of the actor's face and didn't look right. So he ended up using that design on Wolfman, and thus a creature was born. Now on to the actual film. I have a lot of issues with this film, actually. Specifically in how the love interest and Bela Lugosi's character are handled. Where this film succeeds, because I don't like to dwell on negativity, is the lead's struggle with guilt. Lon Chaney Jr. plays a man torn apart on the inside by the beast laying beneath the surface so damn well, and at times you legitimately feel bad for the guy. That's what I like about the film. But moving on, next up, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, filmed in 1943, or released in 1943, sorry. Lon Chaney returns as the Wolfman, but Boris Karloff is replaced by Bela Lugosi. My headcanon is that Dr. Frankenstein found Bela's dead body from Wolfman and used his body for Frankenstein, so it's Talbot versus the man who turned him into a werewolf. It makes it funny. But this is also the first team-up film from Universal Horror, so this is important for more than just the Wolfman thing, but it's also a legitimately good film too. This is probably my favorite Lon Chaney werewolf, to be honest. Next up is Abbot and Costello Meet Frankenstein, released in 1948.
Dracula sleeps in this coffin, but rises every night at sunset. Chick is right. This is awful silly stuff.
Take it all out.
Plus the dangerous and terrifying Wolfman, played by Lon Chaney.
This is where the Universal Horror monsters kind of stopped being taken so seriously. And thankfully, it's all in good fun here because we see Lon Chaney Jr. reprising his role as Wolfman, Vincent Price voicing the Invisible Man, and even Bela as Dracula again. Hell yeah. But it's a funny movie. The Curse of the Werewolf, released in 1961.
To this Spanish town, the night brought drinking and dancing, music and girls, and the moon that turned an innocent man into a savage beast. The Curse of the Werewolf.
The first and the last Hammer horror picture involving a werewolf. Hammer is notorious for its multiple Dracula, Frankenstein, and Mummy pictures in the late 50s and 60s, bringing the Universal horror crew into color with bright, trippy red blood and a penchant for sexual overtones. This film's strong suit is how beautiful it looks. God damn, the set design is impeccable, and the colors are so vibrant and strong. It sucks that the poor outcome led Hammer to never touch the werewolf again. I would have loved for 3 or 4 more werewolf films from Hammer, especially if they all looked this good.
When this strange, unknown killer hits town.
Help me, doctor, please!
The werewolf.
Hey, this is Editing Hound again. In all my rewrites, I nixed quite a few movies, but especially in the history section. I decided to add back in I Was a Teenage Werewolf due to its popularity as a drive-in film, its melding of genres with sci-fi and horror, and also being one of, if not the first werewolf films that has a focus on teenagers and specifically teenage life, something that we would see get expanded upon by films such as Teen Wolf and Ginger Snaps. Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, released in 1968,
it's a super shock spectacle of hideous horror in Chillerama 70 and gaudy color.
or my actual recommendation of Assignment Terror, released in 1970. Frankenstein's Bloody Terror is Paul Naschy's first surviving werewolf film, where he plays recurring fan favorite Count Waldemar Daninsky in 12 films. This guy holds the record for the most outings as a werewolf. I recommend watching Assignment Terror over Frankenstein's Bloody Terror just for how crazy the plot is, involving Universal horror favorites and even aliens that own a traveling circus. Weird. And then the last one on my list is The Beast Must Die. We just talked about it, but I basically put it on here because, again, for different reasons.
You must track down the werewolf. The beast must die.
Kind of a unique take for the time of what a werewolf is. And essentially it's just like a Sherlock Holmes mystery at a castle with Peter Cushing and some audience participation. You know, it's a whodunit. It's interesting. But after that, that kind of leads us into the 80s, where we have this sort of great werewolf renaissance with films like The Howling and American Werewolf in London that pushed the limits of what werewolves meant, becoming more wolf than man and turning them back into something to be feared. So yeah, that's sort of 20 plus years of being obsessed with werewolves, haphazardly crammed into a single video. Hopefully this helped you pick what werewolf film you wanted to watch this year for the spooky month, or any month for that matter if you're seeing this later. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. And yeah, later.